Okay, lot. So today I'm gonna be talking a little bit about equipment farming, and in particular I'm gonna be covering the two dungeons that are listed in here, right? So these are the dungeons that you will want to be farming the majority of the time, because this is the only place, apart from like events and whatever, where you can consistently get the highest tier gear in the game, right? So in this one, you are able to get various like DPS oriented sets, and in this one, you are able to get speed sets plus various tanky or oriented sets, right? So whichever one you farm depends on what you are aiming to do in the game, right? If you are someone who wants to compete competitively in PvP, this wind dungeon is the only dungeon you will want to farm for the rest of your life, right? Because this is the only dungeon where speed sets drop, and speed is unfortunately king in PvP. So without speed sets, you will simply not be able to reach any top ranks past like the first month of the game. And if you are someone who's purely interested in PvE only, you really don't care about PvP, this dungeon is pretty good to farm. You can of course also farm this, right? Because speed sets are very universal, they are very OP. Plus the tank sets are never a bad option even on DPS characters, but this one is very DPS oriented. So it will help you do a lot of damage, it will help you deal with PvE content a little bit easier, but this one is also an option, right? So I'm gonna start with the first dungeon on the list, and that is the dragon one. What is it called exactly? NUSKA. Okay, so with this boss, right, this boss, in my opinion, if you have a decent setup, right, in particularly two characters that I'll mention in a second, it will be one of the easier dungeons, right? I feel like the wind dungeon that I'll talk about next is a little bit of a harder one to beat comparing these two, right? And yeah, with this one, the boss is very much oriented at debuffing your team. You can see that there's a lot of damage overtime effects. He launches those with his attack, he launches those with his passive just from you taking turns, right? So yeah, you do want to have a reliable way to deal with all of the debuffs, right? So there's a lot of damage overtime effects. He also has a burn which allows him to explode those effects. Essentially, if you used Jeremiah, it's essentially the same as her third skill, right? So you don't want those dots staying for a long time on you, otherwise they will deal a lot of damage if he uses the burn ability. And he also has effect resistance, reduction effect, and silence. So all of the effects overall are not like super deadly. Silence, however, if you get a 2-turn silence on you and you don't have a reliable way to cleanse it, trust me, it is a game over, right? So the two core units in this team, right, to make this team work will be, first of all, Chloe, right? And in my opinion, Stein is a very good option because she will, first of all, she is water element, so she will take a bit less damage from the boss, right? It will take less debuffs. Second of all, insane mana cycling on her passive, and third of all, she is able to buff up attack and defense, right? And the teams I'm discussing here are sort of more aimed at auto mode, right? With manual mode, you are able to build teams that will be performing way better than that, right? But yeah, for Stein, you are mostly looking at the passive, 3 mana every 3 turns, and you're looking at the damage and defense boosts. And the next character we really need to think about for this dungeon is Chloe, right? Of course, she does have some displacement, but if you don't have Chloe, this dungeon will become infinitely harder than if you do have her, right? And the simple reason for that is just her passive, right? I'm not even talking about her healing abilities. Of course, you will need healing and she will be perfect for that, but the passive is where she really shines, and every time she moves, she's able to remove one harmful effect from your allies. This means that even without using skills, she is able to pretty much fully counter the boss that you are dealing with, right? And once you have these two units, you just have to add a few additional ones that would help you either sustain a bit more or deal with the boss a little easier. Now for this boss, because it deals a lot with various harmful effects, the chance to reduce or rather the chance to land a harmful effect, right, gets much lower if it attacks an element disadvantage unit. So for this team, if you are able to, I would recommend building a fully water team, right? This is not the case for the other dungeon, for example, but for this one, I would really recommend building that, because as long as he doesn't land any debuffs, right, you will pretty much be able to safely beat the dungeon. So for other options, right, if you are still struggling with some debuffs, Priscilla is a decent option in there, right? Priscilla does have a shield, she does have damage reduction, and she does have immunity, which will allow you to receive way less harmful effects on top of that, right? If you're still struggling to survive, Rampart is another good option. His passive is really amazing. Without even looking at his other active skills, right, his passive alone can counter a lot of what the boss does by constantly providing a shield, right? For DPS options, the one that I would recommend the most is Beatrice, and the reason for that is because Beatrice gets stronger as you receive more harmful effects, right? As the boss applies the harmful effects to you, her damage will be increasing by a lot from her passive, right? So again, another unit that is really good, and probably the main DPS unit for this dungeon if you do have it, right? If you don't, units like the MC and Sasha are also pretty decent, right? For other damage dealers, even if not water element, the almighty Agnes, right, still a good option. Even though she is not a water element, she will be able to do a lot of dots, and because she's buffed out by Stein, you will be able to make it work as well, right? So I'm gonna build a sort of a team and we'll try it out. Okay, so this is the team I'm gonna be trying out, right? I feel like majority of you will usually have Agnes while you're going into this, right? If you don't, of course, try to use another DPS unit. But yeah, Agnes and Chloe, I feel like are 5-star units that really majority of the people will have. They are very popular, they are very good at a lot of content, so I feel like they are one of the main priority targets when it comes to that, right? So I hope that those who are looking at this video do have these units, right? If not, there are of course options, but for Chloe it's very hard to replace her, right? I also know that my gear, right, and my power-ups are a little bit of a higher level compared to global, so to nerf myself a little bit, I'm gonna be removing the mementos from all of my units. These contribute to like a good 20% of my overall stats, so just to make it a little bit of an equal playing field, because I know a lot of people will only have maybe like yellow tier equipment still. So yeah, I'm gonna be removing all of those. That will lower my stats by like a good 20% at least. Who was the last unit? Agnes, right? Yep. Let's remove Agnes artifact, and yeah, I'll enter into the dungeon. I will be running it on auto. However, if you are struggling, you can try it out on manual as well. And yeah, the general idea behind this dungeon is once Stein is buffed up, once Chloe is able to move consistently, you will be able to easily cleanse all of those effects. As you can see, shield from Rampart is already taking place, right? The enemy landed some dots, I believe it was on Agnes. Those are already gone because Chloe moved, right? And yeah, the same standard Agnes will work just as well. Actually, one thing I wouldn't forget to mention is Rampart, right? I believe his damage scales with defense, right? And it should really not be underestimated at this point, right? But yeah, as you can see, boss managed to explode 2 dots on my Agnes. It did like half of her HP, so if you see that your units are struggling to survive, even if they are DPS units, right, you can always go for a little bit more HP. The battle will take longer, right, but the boss doesn't have any sort of scaling, right? So even if the fight takes longer, as long as you are able to survive it, you will beat it, right? But yeah, again, Stein also has the ability to land the glancing hit, right, which will pretty much significantly lower the damage the boss does, as well as his ability to land debuffs, right? This debuff, like the glancing hit or hit reduced, whatever it's called, is essentially like attacking into an element disadvantage, right, at all times. And you can imagine that debuff plus having to attack water units is gonna be brutal for the boss, right? So yeah, we're approaching the egg phase for the boss, right? The thing with egg phase, right? It is very difficult to kill it, right? Even at this point, like even at my level when I found this dungeon a few times, right? On auto, I was not able to kill it purely of the lack of DPS, right? So honestly, don't worry about it too much. I know it will launch a little bit of a nuke when the egg drops, right? But since you have water units, since you most likely will have some shields, since you most likely will have Stein's ultimate buff, you will be able to survive. As you can see, Rampart provided 3-turn defense buff to everyone, right? So yeah, the damage it does, we can look at it. Again, not something that is not survivable, right? And then you have the silence debuffs. We wait for Chloe to move. Hopefully she cleanses it, right? But even if she doesn't, there we go, she managed to use ultimate. I think Chloe has some weird interaction where if she is CC'd and she manages to cleanse the CC, she will auto use ultimate, right? Even on manual mode, by the way. I'm not sure whether this is a bug or intentional, right? But yeah, as you can see, it's working so far. The ultimate did around half of... I was looking mostly at Agnes HP, right? I wasn't worried about the other units. It did around half of Agnes HP, and I think my Agnes at the moment had like 6,000 or 7,000, right? So yeah, it will be able to deal with it. Another thing, if one good way to counter passives, or not passives, counter silence, right, is by making use of passives, right? Because passives are not silenced by that debuff, and a lot of passives are able to give you some sustain as well. So for example, Chloe's passive constantly removes debuffs. Rampart's passives constantly gives shield. So even if you're not able to cleanse with Chloe right off the bat, right, you still have units like Rampart who can provide some sort of sustain, right? But yeah, overall, the general idea of the boss, you can see right here, right? Try to cleanse the dots as soon as possible. Try to bring water units. I would say this is very important in order to making sure that that you are able to win. And yeah, as long as you have Chloe and preferably Stein, you will be able to deal with this boss pretty easily, right? So we're just waiting for the last dots to activate. And yeah, that will be it. We'll go into the different dungeon and I'll explain the theme there, right? There we go. Okay, and next up we have, oh my, these name translations are getting me. Corrupted Apostle or something like that, right? So this is the wind element boss that drops various speed and tanky sets, right? This boss also has two phases. However, in this one, the first one is quite easy, right? The second one is the one that will really bring some trouble for you, right? And yeah, for this one, when it comes to team setup, right, essentially the one unit that I would highly recommend using here will be Agnes, right? First of all, she's gonna be consistently breaking the shields, or rather the guard on the boss, which means that it will be able to attack less and less, right? Essentially a few turns the boss will be fully stunned and will not be able to attack you, preventing some damage, right? Next up, right, even though the element disadvantage applies in here, right, I would still highly recommend using Chloe in here. The reason for that is, first of all, this boss also has some nasty debuffs. So if I remember correctly, it has a stun, it has a silence, right? Yeah, silence, stun. These are very nasty debuffs that will be a little bit hard to cleanse if you do not manage to get a turn, or if you do not manage to resist, right? So there are options to go around it, right? For example, Ciri, if you don't have Chloe, is a decent replacement in here, right? She is very consistent healing option. But then again, Chloe just has a built-in passive with cleanse, which will allow you to get your team back and going much more consistently, right? Yes, she will take a bit more damage here because she is water element, so especially for this dungeon, I would recommend making sure that she is very tanky. I would say at least like 8,000 to 9,000 HP will be necessary, but if you are able to push into the 10,000 and more, it will be even better, right? Apart from these two units, The rest can be somewhat flexible, so overall I would still recommend having an attack buffer with Agnes. That's simply because her dots directly scale with her attack, so the more attack you are able to stack on your units at all times, the more damage she will be able to do, right? So the regular two options apply. First of all, Stein is, even though again she is a water unit, but still a very good option. Even though she is water, compared to something like Pluto, she is able to provide a defense break, or rather a defense buff, which will reduce the damage your whole team takes, right? But if you feel like Stein is not a unit that you want to work with, Pluto is a very good option as well. The only thing with Pluto is she's able to provide defense break, which will be giving you more damage on the boss, but she's very mana hungry, right? So once she ults, once she starts using her second skills, compared to someone like Stein, she will not be able to cycle your mana as much, right? So if you see that you are fine with the sustain but are really struggling with mana, try to play around Stein instead of Pluto. But if you like, you are able to generate enough mana, feel free to stick with Pluto in that team, right? And for the last unit, honestly, I would go for some sort of either tankiness or mana generation, right? Because you pretty much have damage covered, you pretty much have healing covered and cleansing covered. For the fourth spot, you really want to make sure something that enhances your team or something where you lack, right? So, for example, if you want a very YOLO team example, you can put a Jeremiah in there. It will work much better on manual because then you can time when to explode those dots, but if you explode them, she will do massive amounts of damage and will be able to deal with the boss very fast, right? She works decently on auto, however the AI can be a little bit difficult. Plus her second skill is random hits, and the boss does spawn 2 minions next to it, so it can be a bit annoying to deal with, right? Not for Agnes, her abilities are AoE, but for Jeremiah it will be a bit problematic. Another option I really like in this boss is Ravi, right? A very defensive option, but she does have pretty good damage on her first skill. She does have a very consistent defense break once you skill it up, right? Plus, she is also able to redirect a lot of damage from your team to herself, and trust me, it will be easier to keep her alive than a lot of your squishier units, right? So if you do have Ravi and you do at least have one skill up on her first skill, I highly recommend using her as well, right? But in this case, I would probably replace Pluto with Stein if you're running Ravi, because they both have a defense break, so you don't want to duplicate it too much. For some other options, of course, Izania is a decent DPS. Do keep in mind that she is super mana hungry as well, so in a setup like this, you will find yourself running out of mana pretty consistently, right? I know some people use Anna's, personally not a big fan of it, right? I've tried her out in this dungeon, I've tried her out in various other content, but honestly, I feel like she falls really short from Stein or Pluto, right? Because again, she's an attack buffer, she does have a heal, her heal is not enough in a lot of cases in scenarios like this, plus then if you're removing Chloe, you're losing the cleanse, and she might not even be able to proc that heal because she will just die. So yeah, if you do have her, try her out, but personally not a big fan of it. Kana is an okay option. She is able to debuff the enemy with her ultimate, so if you see yourself receiving a lot of damage, and for example if you want to try it out on manual, she is able to ult the boss right before her the enemy uses the ultimate, right? Which is a very good option in that case, because it will lower damage by a lot. I think she gives attack break and a chance to miss, basically a glancing hit, which will pretty much like nullify any damage that the boss does. And yeah, for other options, of course, the standard Theodore if you are playing fully manual. Ferency is a decent option, a lot of mana cycling, a lot of turn cycling, right? And yeah, overall these are sort of like the picks that I would recommend, right? Oh, and of course, I almost forgot one. If you are playing on manual, Berenice is a pretty good option here. If you just constantly spam her second skill, in some cases you might not even need a Chloe, right? But only on manual, right? Her auto AI is very dumb in this dungeon, so it will not work on auto, but if you're playing manual, you can just constantly spam second skill and you will be just fine as well. Okay, and for the testing run, this is the team that I'm gonna be using, right? Again, I'm telling you, I personally prefer Stein over Pluto, right? I feel like with Pluto, you really struggle with mana generation, right? Or otherwise, I would maybe replace Jeremiah with something like Ferency for more mana generation, and then I could place a Pluto there. But yeah, more mana generation, more safety with the defense buff. That's my option. If you prefer to use Pluto, you can try out with that, right? I personally am not a big fan of Pluto in PvE content, right? I prefer her more for like PvP or content where you just really are able to control it manually, right? Okay, there we go. I gave her equipment back. I think I was using her like a different unit or something. And yeah, we're gonna try it out again, and I'll just showcase how it works. Again, like, if you are not ready to speedrun this dungeon as much, right? If you feel like you are really struggling with sustain, in this team I would remove Jeremiah for another sort of either sustain, either a healer, either a mana cycling option, right? Anything that would help you survive with the other 3 units, right? Because all she does really is, in a lot of cases, she will of course prioritize using her ultimate, and her ultimate, technically, it doesn't really do damage, right? All it does is explode dots, but those dots would eventually do damage themselves as well, right? And the ultimate damage itself isn't that big, so she's there mostly to speed up, right? So if you feel like you are safe enough, feel free to use Jeremiah. But if you are not, I would go for a unit that does give a little bit more safety, right? There we go. Unfortunately, her second skill is a bit annoying when it is used on multiple enemies, right? Because it just goes randomly. Ideally, you want to use her second skill when there is only one unit like this, right? That way all of the dots are actually going on the same unit. But yeah, as you can see, we're dealing with the first phase pretty well. Stein is generating enough mana even without her OP Rememento that I always recommend. And yeah, the boss should be dying soon. Even if it doesn't die this move, the guard is broken, so it won't be able to do damage. I think Jeremiah should be able to finish it right after. Of course it doesn't hit, of course it doesn't hit. Okay, this at least hits. And yeah, first phase is done. Second phase is the most difficult one. Right, first phase should be super free. The debuffs in this one are very, very nasty. So yeah, this is where Chloe will really have her time to shine. Right, there will be silences, there will be stuns, there will be beneficial effect blocks from those minions next to her. Right, and yeah, we'll see how it deals with that. Stein does have defense buffs active on pretty much everyone, except Darkness, I guess. But yeah, we're getting the stuns, we're getting the buff blocks. Chloe, perfect cleanse, perfect ultimate, as always. As long as she is able to use the ultimate, she will use it when enemies are, or rather when allies are low, so yeah, works out pretty well. Another second skill, everyone is pretty much full HP. As soon as Stein tops up the buffs, right? Hopefully not now, but once they are cleansed. Okay, well, of course she buffs now, of course she buffs. So she won't receive herself, but... Okay, Chloe is keeping up everyone pretty healthy from what I can see. Ultimate should be able to survive it. I'm just a bit worried about Stein. Yeah, Stein, it can be a problem a bit if she decides to cycle too much. But I think the boss is not gonna attack now. I think the boss is gonna split the minions, so you should be safe. Yeah, she doesn't attack, so even if the guards are broken, your Chloe will be able to follow up right after, right? And yeah, another ultimate that gets Stein to around half HP. She should be able to buff before the big attack, hopefully. Okay, she exposed the dots. Not exactly what I wanted, but... Oh, does Stein get mana though? That's the question. Does Stein get mana here? She does not. Oof, that's unfortunate. She should get her next turn though. Oh, she still doesn't get mana. Ooh, Okay, she should be able to survive still. Oh yeah, the boss guards were broken. The boss guard was broken, so it's easy. Okay, she buffs up. Perfect. Defense buff. These buffs should last until the end of the battle, I think. We got more healing, right? Again, like Chloe, usually more than enough healing, but if you struggle, for example, another really good healer option is CD, especially if you place both of them in a team. They will be able to provide insane amounts of healing, right? Because with CD, she doesn't even need to attack to provide her healing. A lot of her healing comes just from her passive alone. But yeah, Chloe should ult. The boss should be dying next turn. I'm hoping that Stein is able to buff up. Oh, never mind. She just explodes, I guess. Okay, Jeremiah. I think my Agnes might be dying here, to be honest. I think my Agnes might be dying here, but that's not a big problem because they're already all pretty much dead. And Jeremiah will be able to finish it. Yeah, Agnes is gone. But one dot from Jeremiah, and the boss should be dead. Okay, one more hit. Come on, one more hit. Yeah, I'm just realizing now that early game you might struggle with this quite a bit, right? Because I've just removed the memento from my units, and that's like already 20 to 25% of the stats gone. And they are struggling, right? But again, if you replace Jeremiah with another safety option, you will be much better off, right? That's pretty nice rune, or equipment, I mean. And yeah, this one is not too great. But yeah, these are the teams, sort of like the thoughts behind the teams that I would usually use for these dungeons, right? Again, if you're struggling with sustain, you can do something like this. This will provide much more healing, and it will be less prone to getting debuffed, right? Because all of the healing comes from passive pretty much. Plus, it's an additional cleanse just in case something happens, right? And yeah, also an option, but a bit less consistent in my opinion. But yeah, that's pretty much my sort of 2 cents on these dungeons, right? At least the way that I look into farming them when I was building the teams, right? I mostly farmed this one, but I do know that the dragon, from what I've tested, right, is a much easier dungeon than the wind harpy or whatever she's called, right? So yeah, hopefully this helps you out a bit. Also, for those who are watching, if you do have a working team, especially for like a high level of these dungeons, feel free to leave them in the comments, right? I feel like it could help some others when looking into the teams that you have used, right? Especially at like a lower level than Kaleido rank 10, right? Because for me, again, I have a lot of the units, they are skilled up, so my perspective can be a little bit skewed compared to a newer player, right? But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. Yeah, make sure to subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more Rememento content, and yeah, peace.